Lorraine, go ahead.
Okay, so let us start this program with a prayer. Will Sarita please do the honors?
Let us all close our eyes and meditate on the reason for this gathering. Let us ask the Almighty to give us calmness and to think the will to think about issues pertaining to children, and also to ask ourselves this question: how could we help the children, especially those who are vulnerable? Let us open our hearts and minds to unlearn and learn things, especially regarding child labor. Let us together understand this great cause by actively involving ourselves in this discussion. We pray to the Almighty to bless Dr. Niranjan, Mary, Arlene, and all of us present here to understand, to guide us and help us to understand the issues pertaining to children. God, we ask you to bless this seminar so that we in turn can be blessing to others and especially to our little ones. Let us take a moment of silence and then open our eyes and begin with this webinar.
Okay, so our panelists for today have been in this arena for many, many years, and they will be in a position to help us see how we can be instruments of change. We have Dr. Niranjan Aradhya. He is a development educationist, mentor of SDMCs, and chief advocate of state-funded commission school system. He has a PhD in education and is a noted development educationist on various SDMC committees in Karnataka. He has made outstanding contributions to strengthen public education and ensure equitable quality education to all children in India. He is a noted researcher, teacher, and advocate on issues related to school education. He has traveled both in India and abroad and spoken at various seminars and education forums. Dr. Aradhya has authored and co-authored several books, articles, and columns, giving critical and insightful thoughts on equality and justice in education. He has also written prolifically in the vernacular languages. He was and is a mentor of many prestigious boards and committees and is the founder member of the Karnataka State Commission for Protection of Child Rights. A valued member of the committee to monitor the implementation of Kannada Learning, the Kannada Learning Act, and a member of the core committee of the Midday Rural Meal Program. Welcome, Dr. Aradhya.
Thank you very much.
We also have Dr. Mary, who has a PhD in psychiatric social work. Dr. Mary is a respected member of the Women's Commission and is presently an assistant professor of social work at Christ University, Bangalore. Dr. Mary has worked at NIMHANS and at Spandana. She has special qualifications in substance addiction, tech addiction, child sexual abuse, and is a guide for research students of MSW at Christ University. Welcome, Dr. Mary. We have Arlene Manoharan, who has a master's in social work from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and she has specialized in family and child welfare. Arlene is the Joint Secretary of the Women's Commission and has 3 decades of experience working in the rights and needs of vulnerable children. She has worked with Sneha Sadan, Mumbai, Chaitanya Homes, and the Salesians of Don Bosco. And she has worked with the Research Center of the National Law School of India for child and law, working with lawyers, counselors, and social workers. She was a research fellow as well as a coordinator. She helped design the curriculum for a postgraduate diploma on child rights law. She has been a member on several prestigious committees and now works as an independent child protection specialist. She also consults with Enfold and the Sisters of Our Lady of Charity. I welcome all 3 of you, very qualified panelists, and I thank you for accepting our invitation to do this webinar. Over to you, Arlene.
Thank you so much, Lorraine, and to all my other women members of the Women Division of the Archdiocese of Bangalore, spirited women, enthusiastic women, and empathetic women. And that is why I think this particular topic on child labor has been identified. One would try to do with women. And I would like to start by saying that, a woman's heart, a mother's heart, a sister's heart, an auntie's heart. I think women have something special. We're all made in the image and likeness of our Lord, of course. But as women, we have something more to offer. That is that empathy and that compassion, especially during the past 2 years where we have witnessed children and families being pushed into very, very difficult circumstances. And to this webinar and to see what is it we, ordinary women, some of us, with perhaps, very wonderful experiences at the workplace, some of us working so hard, all of us have opportunities to address the problem of child labor. I would particularly like to highlight that for some of you who may not be aware, there's an international convention called the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, a wonderful document which I really urge each and every one of you, just download it, just Google UNCRC or United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's a very simple document that all of us can read, all of us can understand. There's something that's 100% going to shift in your mind and in your heart. You will probably go your own childhood, your own adolescence, and I'm sure many of us will have that sense of being so grateful for being so privileged for the childhoods that we have enjoyed. And then we will be challenged more to think about the children that we see who are struggling and challenged especially by the pandemic. And we recognize that we have been able challenges that have faced our families, most of us. We had more than 1 or 2 rooms in our homes. If you had children, each one had their own little room. You have a laptop, you have a phone, you can continue to access your online education, you have access to healthcare. Many of us paid for our vaccines. We have a bank balance, we have health. Our bodies were healthy enough to withstand if we did get COVID. We did lose friends and families, but for families living on the edge, what happens to women in those families who do not have ancestral property, do not have the support system, the safety nets, and they are struggling to feed their children, struggling to cope with perhaps ill health themselves, having to work outside, and many of them were not even paid, even if they were helpers or domestic helpers our homes. Many of them may not have even received their full wage because they were not allowed to come to work. And these women perhaps had to push their own children to try and beg or to go to work. They had to also face issues of mental health problems within their own homes, domestic violence, husbands who have lost jobs, schools have closed. So what does the right to free and compulsory education, the RTE Act that was enacted in 2009, what does it mean for us? This act, and I'm sure my colleague, I'm so happy to have my colleague, former colleague and dear friend, Dr. Niranjan, as a panelist, and Dr. Mary, they will tell you much more. What does this act, the Child Labor Act, and the connection to the Right to Education Act, and the link to the Constitution of India? What is it in simple terms that we need to understand is this meaning of a fundamental right to education, to live dignity, to have a sense of a childhood in which you can grow to your fullest potential. The likelihood of children, many girls, dropping out from school at all levels and being pushed into child labor, or being at the risk of being trafficked for labor from Jharkhand, from Northeast. There are many that actually enable these children to come and work in our homes and the homes of our friends and families. So let's look inwards and say, yes, we do take care of these girls, we do take care of these children, and we try to educate them, we support them. The opportunity here now is to look beyond that. As what more can we do? Because the problems that these children face, and I, as a social worker, I've worked for many years, and I still work with children and families who are living in street situations, struggling to survive, no income, no jobs, children, even girls. I know at least 3 girls who I knew before the pandemic, lovely girls going to our Christian schools. And now, on the street, at the back of mobile bikes of either other girls or other boys on the street, and many of them into being pushed into behaviors and survival behaviors just to survive, some of which is also illegal. How does one cope with these issues? What does one do? I would just, my job here is really to give a context. We are here to understand the nitty-gritties of the legal framework. We are here as women and families, many of our family members are here, to think more deeply in how, in a very concrete way, in a very real way, within our own homes, in our churches, in our parishes, and beyond. What is it that we can do to, in some way, make a concrete difference to prevent this growing tide of children who are being pushed into labor, illegal activities, at the cost of their childhood, at the cost of their health, at the cost of their ability to grow into women of substance, to grow into women who can contribute, who can grow into women who are mothers, able to take care of their little ones. What is it that we can do? So with these opening remarks, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm going to start. Please note, this conversation today is really a conversation. So I do invite all our listeners, all our participants who are here today, to please take down notes, ask questions when there is an open house right at the end. So the format for today is I'm going to put out a poll question now, and I'm going to put that question on the link. So I'm going to ask you to answer that by answering the poll on the link, and then I'll present the answer to that poll question. And then after that, I'm going to invite Dr. Mary first, and to give in her session. She will speak for about 15 minutes, and then we have Dr. Niranjan Aradhya's presentation for another 15 minutes. I'm going to have a second poll question, and then a little conversation and an open house. So we're going to have at least 20 to 25 minutes of an open house at the end. So looking forward to your questions and your suggestions, concrete practical suggestions of what we can do to make a difference. So I'm going to launch the poll, and I've prepared it on, and I'm going to copy the link and paste it on the chat. Just give me a minute. I hope all of you can access the chat. Please see if you can access the chat and you can start answering the poll. Can you see the poll and are you able to access it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to wait for another 10 seconds and I'm going to click. I hope you're all done. I can't see any votes. Have you put in your votes?
Can't seem to open it. It's not
Okay, I've got a couple of votes. There are 4 votes that have come in so far, and I'm going to wait again. Take your time, don't worry. This is okay. And it's not an exam. It's just a point of conversation in which we'll be able to understand what is the law say about child labor in India. Another 10 seconds. Okay. Okay, I'm going to refresh the results and then I'll present it to you.
Okay, you've got to copy the link to Google.
Shall I just present it because this is taking a little long? It doesn't matter. It's okay. It doesn't matter if you've not been able to vote, Lorraine. I'm just going to present my screen, and it's a space for Dr. Mary to and Dr. Niranjan to respond. So just give me a second while I present. Can you see my screen?
Started sharing, so not yet. Yeah.
Yes.
Now it's
So
there
there
on
are
the
3.
screen.
Yes. So there are 3 options. Is it prohibited below the 18 years of age? That means no child below the age of 18 years is the age for up to which a person is considered as a child in India. So child labor is prohibited below the 18 years of age, the first option, and we have 3 votes there. Prohibited below 14 years of age and regulated between 14 and 18. We have 2 votes there, and we have 1 vote for prohibited below 14 years of age. So there are 3 options there, and I'm going to now pass it on to Dr. Mary, and after that directly to Dr. Niranjan, and then we'll have a little conversation. So Dr. Mary, over to you.
Okay. So should I start present my PPT now?
Yes, please, Dr. Mary.
Yeah. So thank you, Arlene and Lorraine, Rina, and Dr. Niranjan and all the team. So I am glad and fortunate to be sharing a few of those information and then facts and then the work and some of the evidence that I have dealt with at the same time. The resources that I'm going to project have been able to collect from different sources, evidence sources from different like UN, then Bachpan Bachao, that is Satya Arti Foundation, Children Foundation. Then I was also able to meet some of the staff there in Karnataka Labor Department. And I also was able to be part of the team in terms of to have rescued some of the children who have been trafficked in different forms from other parts of Northeast during the lockdown, the first phase of lockdown. So just give me a moment. I'm going to project my slide, and then as we are going to focus the topic on addressing child labor. So the topic here will be, I will start with, I will start with the topic related to understand what is child labor. I can see that, most of, the percentage in terms of the age criteria, all those things also is very important for us to understand. And I'm sure that Dr. Niranjan and myself, we will be sharing the information which will at least help us to understand where exactly who is a child and who is an adolescent according within this context, child labor. So now to start with, so I'm going to project my slide. Okay.
Dr. Mary, just a little reminder that after 14 minutes, I'm going to give you a little nudge. Okay, yeah,
sure.
Thank you.
Is my slide available?
Yes,
is my slide available there on the screen?
It is. Can you please just use presentation mode?
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Mary.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is good.
Okay. Yeah. Very brief about this interest on anti-human trafficking. It's of course I was part of the team in mental health as a practitioner, having worked in having associated with CRISE as a professor, assistant professor there. So I've got a lot of opportunity to be dealing with these kind of topic. And in addition to that, because since lockdown, so I had come across a lot of cases from the Northeast. So being a part of the national volunteer for Meghalaya and the Northeast, so a lot of calls, a lot of support that required from our end, from me, and then from the team from the Northeast. So with that, and then we also, under my supervision and guidance, so students are also, we also form a club which is called as Northeast Meghalaya Anti-Human Trafficking Club. So we also continue to be working with the other parts of with other faculties from the other parts of Northeast Meghalaya in particular. So with that, so this topic that related to addressing child labor. So trafficking, there are different forms of trafficking in person or human trafficking. So one of those human trafficking, one of the types is child labor. So that is the topic that we are going to focus today. And to address this child labor, so first we need to understand what is exactly human trafficking. So as one of the forms in human trafficking, so let us try to understand what is exactly. So human trafficking, according to the UN, so it is where these components, 4 components, is very important for all of us to understand that if there is any form of recruitment or transportation or transfer or harboring or receive of people through force of fraud or deception, deception with the aim of exploiting them for profit, irrespective of gender, male or female, women or children, so it could be from any background. So that is considered to be a crime. So this occurs in every region of the world. So and India is not free from that and from such crime, and in fact it's one of the second largest country in the world to have such kind of issue related to trafficking. And the traffickers often use violence or fraudulent employment agencies and fake promises of education and job opportunities to trick the victims. So this definition which is given by United Nations is very important for all of us. Those who are, I'm sure that all of us who are here, because we are interested to do something to contribute in different levels for our for the victims, as well as to prevent from being the victim of such crime, right? So yeah, it's not moving. Okay, so and then there are different the major types of trafficking, like sex trafficking, forced labor, domestic servitude, organ trade, and under sex trafficking. So so any activities on any kind of trafficking of individuals, whether children or of any gender. So for sexual exploitation, or for marriage which is forced, which is against the will of the person, or because of the underage. So these are falls under sex trafficking. And forced labor, there are two types: what we call child labor, that we are discussing today, and bonded labor. And domestic servitude, that and many of us, I think, directly and indirectly, we are also part of the such kind of activities or crimes. So let us commit that. So I think we got to from this session, I think we got to be sensitive enough to understand that something that we have each one of us has some kind of role and responsibility to be preventing such kind of activities which related to child labor. So this trafficking, it also involves related to organ trade. Okay, so especially during this pandemic, so such kind of crime has been happening. And then where they traffic different age group for the purpose of organ transplantation, and then for the for trade. So such kind of thing, which is according to the Indian law, there are laws and policies related to that, where it's punishable and it's a crime. And why is that? What are the factors which have led to this trafficking? Is various factors, and some of these are mainly due to displacement, conflict, poverty, lack of access to education, and unemployment, violence, then damaging societal norms such as child marriage, where there is no proper system on law system at within our community or society, and it's much more vulnerable to to be in such kind of situation. And then local conditions that drive people to migrate. So because of migration also, it's one of the other factors which can lead to this trafficking. And oppression, lack of human rights, and people did not know what is their rights. And I'm so glad that Arlene mentioned about the first thing that we before we start. So she also shared with the about human rights, that national human rights. That is very important for each one of us. Also, one of the component that we need to know. And a lack of social or economic opportunity, risk from violence or instability, and other comparable causes. There are many other reasons, of course, which have led to this trafficking. And political turmoil, or unstable government, then militarism, civil unrest, internal armed conflict, and natural calamities. All of these may contribute to such increased trafficking of different forms. And coming to child labor, so as I mentioned already, that child labor is nothing but one of the forms, one of those forms in trafficking in persons. So when do we call child labor? Not all work that done by minors can be considered child labor. Okay, participation of children or teenagers in work that does not affect their health or personal development or interfere with their education, so it doesn't that is not considered as child labor. Okay, such activities that which helps the child to enhance their growth, physical, mental, and educational aspect, then those kind of activities are not considered as child labor. However, child labor are those kind of activities or work that drops children of their childhood, their potential, and their dignity, while also being detrimental to their physical, mental development, or psychological development, or emotional development. And then such kind of activities are work related, which can be considered under child labor. And child labor is, it's also one of the, it's the system of employing a child to provide labor or service to any person for any payment to the child, or any person exercising control over the child. Okay, the child will be doing the work, and then somebody is controlling the the payment, and then either their own parents. That's why that sometimes within the family members, they can traffic their own children in the name of job, in the name of to earn money. So that's why we each one of us has got some kind of responsibility within our own home and our neighbor, our relatives, to educate them about what is child labor. Okay, directly and indirectly, many of us might have involved or might have come across, but we did not know. So, and then indulging in the economic activities on a part-time or full-time basis, so these kind of activities also considered to be in child labor. And coming to the age perspective, so why do we call child labor? Okay, under child labor, so a child who is below 14 years of age, okay, if a child engage in any such kind of activities with the purpose to earn money, and then also which with the purpose, and then which also interferes with his or her growth, physical, mental, and education, that drops their childhood time, and then so then that kind of activities is called, it falls under child labor. Okay, so I think we can skip this because we don't have much time. Okay, so now there are various forms of child labor, and the worst, some of those worst form of child labor according to UN, according to the UN ILO, and then Convention 182. So any such activities where the child are enslaved or separated from their families, exposed to significant dangers and illnesses, or left to fend for themselves on the street of big cities, frequently at a young age. So these are also some form of worse child labor. Okay, procuring or offering children for illicit activities. So sometimes children are used for to procure drugs, or to sell drugs, or smuggling drugs. So they use children. So such kind of activities falls under child labor. So all forms of slavery, trafficking of children, using children for prostitution or in pornography, and the world of technology now, it's very common that this pornography where for sex trade online, the dark web. So these where they misuse, they exploit the children for sex trade. So such kind of activities also, which can be it's also considered under worst form of child labor. And any work that harms the health physically or emotionally, psychologically, physically, so or the morals of children. So all of these are under child labor. Okay, and what are those indicators? Some of us may not be might have come across, but many of us might not be aware of what exactly. So these are some of the signs or the indicators that we can see who are those children, from seeing them or observing them, we can know that there's something fishy, or there's something that we can do something about the child or save the child. So these are some of the sign or indicators, like always lives with the employer. Okay, so the living condition of the child is very poor, and multiple individuals confined to a small space. And then traffic child will not be able to speak. This is very important with an individual, all with an individual. So their answers, this is very something I think very useful for all of us. Their answers seems to be rehearsed and scripted. Okay, so they will not be able to answer many things or when asked any kind of questions. In fact, the kind of answers that you get is kind of scripted ones, or they will repeat it the same thing. Okay.
Dr. Mary, sorry to interrupt you. Another 1 minute more.
Okay. So the employees always hold identity documents of the child. Fiscally, they are fiscally also they face some kind of challenges, like being assaulted, where you can see the brushes and then cuts, injuries, etc. Child is always timid and fearful. You can see that they are kind of very fearful and then not ready to talk, withdrawn. Child seems to be malnourished, and then always avoiding eye contact or engaging with any other children around. So these are some of the indicators. So coming to the contributing factors for child labor, this is something very important. The reason behind is huge demand of cheap and unskilled labor, poverty, which we already mentioned, illiteracy, migration, unemployment, early marriage, and social exclusion or migration. So because they are out of the system, so it's much more, they are much more vulnerable to get trapped by these traffickers. Okay, so I think yeah, there are myths and misconceptions. So probably I think I have to stop now.
Mary, yeah, I think
Yeah.
time is up, but I
Okay,
think
fine.
we'll have a little bit more time later if there's some content
Sure,
that you want to share during the open house. Is that all right?
Fine, that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt you in the middle of it, but I
No.
think this prevention, and we can even have it as a conversation later. So thank you so much, Dr. Mary, for setting the context and even linking it to human trafficking in a much broader sense. So thank you. If you can stop sharing, and over to Dr. Niranjan. Lovely to have you with us on the panel today, and having journeyed with you for so many years, Niranjan, your passion for children, for their right to education. I know he's going to just fire you all up to talk about how ensuring that a child is in school is the best way to know that the child is not at risk of harm and of losing their sense of dignity and worth by being pushed into labor. So over to you, Niranjan.
Thank you very much, Arlene, for all your good words. It was really excellent working with you for such a long time. And certainly it's a great honor to be here for this presentation. Because of the paucity of the time, can everyone hear me? Yeah, because...
Yes.
Yeah. So just because of the paucity of time, I just want to quickly run through this PPT, basically to understand what really the problem and how it is linked with right to education, which is one of the important fundamental right after right to life. Right to life is 21 and right to education is 21 capital A. So the very purpose of this discussion, or the premises of this discussion, is basically to understand that children constitute more than 1/3 of the total population in this country. And all children have fundamental human rights and entitlements for their all-round development is the basic premises. The state has a primary obligation to recognize and respect the rights of children and to create enabling environment. I just, kind of underline creating an enabling environment that is conducive for holistic development of children. And also very importantly, I'm bringing, because of the vulnerability of the children, tender age, formative years, children need much more care and protection, not only for themselves, but also to protect their rights. Best interest of the child should be the guiding principle. This is already, Arlene indicated, one of the UN convention, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. One of the core principles of this convention is the best interest of the child. Whenever we make, kind of programs, policies, laws, or even our decisions, whatever, it should be based on the best interest of the child, and it should be the guiding principle for all our action. The progress and development of any nation depends upon the way we bring up children. So particularly to use this, sentence, when Kothari Commission was appointed, Education Commission in 1964-66, after examining almost all the factors, they came to a conclusion and started the first sentence of the 4-volume report as the destiny of the nation is being shaped in our classroom. So therefore, I think all of us can understand what is the importance of education in addressing any issues related to children or any violations related to children, and particularly to see that the best place for children to work is the school. So that is the kind of slogan that, people are using it now. So this is the basic framers. There are many good, framework both at the international level as well as at the Indian level, so that we can, understand this issue from a normative perspective, because, already there are very, clear laws, legislations, programs, both at the international level, what we call as international instruments, which starts from UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, starting from 1948 till UNCRC, which was open for ratification in 1989, and India ratified in the year 1992. And also we have the Indian Constitution, which is the mother law for all, protection, social justice, equality of opportunities, all these things as the core principles. And also we have, host of policies, programs, and legislations related to child development. There are many laws. I don't want to just list them. There are policies and programs particularly to help children to develop in a manner which is very conducive, respecting their childhood, and also really creating an enabling environment. Just to take a look at the Constitution, which are the core provisions that protects the child rights and also encourages the child development. 21A, that is the fundamental right to education. 23(1), which right now Dr. Mary touched upon that. 24, which talks about the prohibition of child labor up to 14 years. 39F, which talks about creating a conducive and healthy environment for the healthy development of children. And 45, the state shall certainly make provisions for the development of children below 6, which is a new article, as part of the 86th Amendment. 46, which we are talking about vulnerable categories coming from a very marginalized section as a special provision in the Constitution. So a state can make special provisions for the protection of those categories, and also particularly women and children. Of course, we have a special provision in a decentralized, democracy. All decentralized, institutions, whether it is a panchayat or it is a nagarapalike or it is a town municipal corporation, all of them have equal responsibility. It's a kind of a decentralized approach to take measures for the development, particularly the development of children in a very healthy manner. So this is the overarching framework from the Constitution, which empowers us to enact legislations, to frame policies, to plan programs. All these comes from the Constitution. So the Constitution is one of the very important document which talks about creating a very conducive environment for the protection, promotion, and development of children. If you look at the policies, it's a very, kind of interesting slide. One can see number of, programs, policies, legislations, which is in gray. It's all legislation, whether it is the JJ Act, whether it is the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act, whether it is the prohibition of marriage, child marriage, or it is National Food Security Act. And addition to that, we have a whole lot of policies, national education policy, national health policy, national, child labor policy, youth policy, children policy. And of course, we have one recently also announced by the, present government, that is the National Policy on Education 2020. Apart from that, we have many programs designed particularly, to abolish child labor practice and to ensure, to realize right to education, particularly Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. There are many programs. But despite all these, policies, programs, constitutional provisions, legislations, I just want to, draw your attention that in a way we have failed to provide childhood, happy childhood for our children. Children are deprived with the childhood. We have denied childhood for them. I just want to link up this denial of childhood, how it affects particularly schooling, and also how it affects the other aspects of this denial. Number one, if you look at child labor, it interferes with the schooling, particularly it in a way force children to make an attempt to combine school attendance with excessive long, heavy work, particularly those who are working. Of course, the new legislation talks about prohibition up to 14, but unfortunately, it also put a cursor saying that children can work in family occupation, which is again a very, serious setback. It also creates an obligation for them to leave school prematurely. So therefore, we, we just used a new, a kind of acronym. We don't call it as dropout. It is basically push out, because it is creating an obligation for children to leave school early before even completing their minimum education of 8 years, which is a fundamental right. It is also depriving them the opportunity to attend school, because all of us know that school is such a wonderful place for your physical, mental, emotional, and intellectual, kind of development. It is, when they meet up with other children, sit with other children, eat with other children, that is one way of cherishing our, constitutional goals. That is tolerance, pluralism, respecting each other, cooperation, dignity, all these things. These are the core values in the Constitution. So all these things can happen at the school level when children come together, work together, and eat together. At the same time, child labor also deprives, already these issues are flagged by Dr. Mary. It deprives childhood, which is very, kind of a serious issue. It is detrimental for all, kind of development, but also the dignity of the children. Because all of us, we used to say that children are no less human beings. They are not lesser human beings. They have equal rights. All human rights are also, the child rights. So therefore, the dignity of the child is affected. It is detrimental for all their development, particularly mentally, physically, socially, morally. It is very dangerous and harmful to children. So we are almost taking away the childhood itself, so that, we are denying a happy childhood for children. And therefore, child labor not only, deny right to education, but also it denies the core thing of happy childhood, joyful childhood. So therefore, I think we need to address this issue in a much more, serious way, particularly to, abolish all forms of child labor. So there are different, of course, efforts. I just want to recognize that right from 46 to 46, 47 to till date 2017, there are various, efforts made by the national and state government to address this issue. But I just want to say that many of these, kind of efforts are not really yielded, to address this issue in a complete manner. Of course, there is a lot of awareness. There is a lot of, kind of interventions. Many children have been rescued, rehabilitated, and mainstreamed to attend mainstream education. But still, there is an estimation where India has roughly about 4 crore children who are out of school. And this is given by various agencies. So therefore, the magnitude of the issue is really something very serious. If you look at Karnataka alone has about 48,000 children who are out of school. This is an official statistics by the department, but all of us know sometimes this official statistics need to be taken with a pinch of salt. So anyhow, so the issue is not really the number, but the problem persists. The issue persists. We are not able to provide a joyful childhood to all our children even after 75 years of Indian independence is an issue that I just want to flag for discussion. There are different schools of thought when it comes to addressing the child labor. The first school of thought, it says, like up to 14, at least up to 14, it's a fundamental right. All children who are out of school should be treated as child labor. That is a sociological definition that all of us have accepted in a way so that it is easy for, identifying the children. So child labor induces poverty because there is an argument that poverty brings child labor, but this is the other way around. In fact, child labor induces poverty. Engagement of children in any work cannot be allowed and it cannot be accepted. There is second school of thought which talks about total elimination of child labor is not possible because of the socio-economic reasons. Advocate a kind of a gradual, sequential, selective approach. That is where we are using these two phrases, prohibition, regulation. Prohibition, regulation, that is the whole, kind of terminology that we got it from. Advocates a dual approach of prohibition and regulation. There is another interesting third school of thought which says that state and civil society have failed to, address this issue, failed to abolish child labor and to realize the right to education. So therefore, you leave it to the children themselves, to decide whether they want to work or whether they want to go to school. I think, yes, certainly we have to ask children, we have to get their opinion, but certainly in the best interest of the children, I don't think that we can leave this, issue to resolve themselves because they need certainly the support of adults. Of course, I subscribe to the first school of thought that education being a fundamental right, there is no fun in talking about prohibition of child labor, practice of child labor. It should be completely prohibited and all children should be there in the school. School is the best place for children
Sorry
to
to
work.
interrupt you, Dr. Niranjan.
Yeah.
Another 1 minute left. Yeah.
Yes. So therefore, see what I personally feel, I just, kind of proposes, despite all these differences and all these things, we are not able to really address this issue. So therefore, we need to treat education as an important goal that, Constitution is given. So therefore, we need to, see that education is not just, addressing the child labor, but also achieving the social good. It's a tool for larger social, transformation. Therefore, right to free and compulsory and good quality education up to a particular level is the best option to address this issue. So state has also an obligations. So with these, I will just skip few slides. What is that we can do as conscious citizens? The reason to mention the conscious citizens coming together itself shows that we have, kind of so much concern for the issue and we are willing to do, some, kind of concrete things to address this issue. So the first thing that I suggest, pandemic has created a very devastating effect both on education as well as the learning, increasing the incidence of child labor many fold. Arlene has already mentioned about it. So what we can do, visit your nearby government aided or low budget school and volunteer work with the school authorities to identify and bring back all children back to the school. I think that is one concrete thing that we can do. Motivate school teachers to ensure that all children studying in school prior to the pandemic can be brought back to the schools. Create awareness among parents, public about the ill effects of the child labor. Involve your immediate, civil society organizations so that we can have effective prevention measure, rescue, rehabilitation, and mainstreaming them to the education. And also create a vigilant child protection committee at your, wherever you are living, whether it is street, mohalla, village, ward, slum, wherever we are, so that we can create that kind of committees. These committees, we can facilitate. These committees can work in collaboration with the immediate local self-government and the school management committee, which is a mandate to retain all children in the school. The last slide, long-term, what should be the long-term approach? Rights-based approach and the best interest of the child should be the guiding principles to address this issue. Creation of employment opportunities for adults, help them increase their earnings, thereby relieving them of the pressure to push their children to the employment. Ensuring minimum wages. All of us know that many a times we are not even paying the minimum wages for our own domestic workers, for our own people who are working with us. I think we need to just think about it. Vulnerable families should be covered under comprehensive social protection scheme to ensure a decent living. So last but not the least, addressing the root cause and dealing with the socio-economic issues so that we can build a society where children can live with dignity along with their family members. This is what just I want to share. This is my last slide. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Probably, I think all of us can work together to address this issue. This is what from my basket, just to share this with you. I'm always with you to engage on the larger aspects, like whether it is law, whether it is right to education, what we can do, how do we really use this legislative framework in a much more meaningful manner so that we can make our children's lives more meaningful and happy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Dr. Niranjan and Dr. Mary. I think for many of us, this is like a feast in some way. I think we have been provided opportunities to learn more and to understand that how complex this issue is. Not a simple issue at all. And there is a basket of laws and policies and schemes that the government has brought out. And as members of the Women's Commission, we really need to enhance our own awareness of what opportunities there are,
Are we able to hear Arlene?
No, we can't hear her. No. It's hanging.
Okay. Dr. Niranjan, that was a very comprehensive presentation, and Dr. Mary too. Thanks a lot. We're waiting for her to come back in the meantime.
I can do that. I believe Arlene has lost her.
Would you want to continue, Mary or Dr. Niranjan, in the meantime?
Yeah, we have given a very brief presentation. Whatever we have just presented here in 15 minutes is just a tip of it is not really a complete understanding of the issue. But what is very important when you talk about fundamental right, certainly fundamental right has its own justiciability. When we talk about fundamental right to education, which is justiciable right under capital 21 capital A. So therefore all of us have responsibilities to realize this fundamental right. So the question is, in what way we can help, like as citizens of this country, whether we can do, kind of volunteer, or we can, engage ourselves, to address this issue. So the best way, as I just mentioned in the last two slides, we can visit nearby government schools and take their, kind of attendance and see how many children have left school because of the pandemic. There are studies available. Probably maybe 30 to 40% of the children have, kind of possibility of leaving school. So if you are able to at least bring back all those children, to the school, I think that itself is a very, kind of a great job that each one of us can do. At the same time, of course, these children have a great loss of learning. I think they must almost forget everything that what they have learned in different grades. And if you offer a kind of facilitating, to, give back, or to help them to, cope up with these learning gaps, help them to understand the basics like language, mathematics, whatever. I think that is another way of, kind of helping. And certainly creating small groups in the vicinity, in our own neighborhood, kind of whether it is a street or a ward, wherever we are. So we can create small, groups and be vigilant. Whenever you find the practice of child labor, immediately we can call 1098, which is a child helpline, and rest of the things they will take care of. In the sense, suppose if it is really a child labor, then they will certainly invoke the law, because the latest legislation, which was amended in 2016, clearly prohibits child labor up to 14, and it regulates adolescent child labor from 15 to 18. Even in case of adolescent child labor, child cannot work beyond 6 hours. For every after 3 hours, there should be a kind of interval so that the child can rest for 1 hour. And also the child cannot work from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. So there are a lot of procedures. I think probably we can certainly get involved in this, and we can be a kind of a great kind of supporter to abolish child labor practice. That is what I think probably Dr. Mary can add many more points.
I just have a question there, because we raised it the other day, and Arlene had the other angle to it, and she said, she said even before raising, there are certain kind of questions that we need to ask about the socio-economic background of that family, because that would have contributed to it today, instead of directly calling up, the number that you mentioned, which will put the family into further trouble. Could you give us all a guide as to what we could do before we call up the numbers to ascertain whether it's a genuine case or not?
There are two things, like certainly employing the child, below 14 is an offense. It's a cognizable offense under the new legislation. It's a cognizable offense. So any family, kind of employing the child is kind of committing offense. Certainly this child need to be identified, and the child need to be produced before the child welfare committee under the Juvenile Justice Act. But the other way of addressing these issues, whenever you find a family which is really struggling to kind of educate their children, really struggling kind of resources of educating those children, I think the way we address is completely different. When the law is violated, when they need kind of a support, a particular family which is economically, socially backward, helping that family is different. When encouraging kind of child labor, when some of the families are employing children as child laborers, it's a cognizable offense. We cannot really excuse them. We can't have a kind of a panchayat there, to ask, just release the child. See, for whatever the violations, they have to certainly go through a kind of a course. So therefore, one thing is creating that awareness. Employing any child below 14 is cognizable offense under the law now. You cannot employ them. Even kind of in case of hazardous industries, you cannot employ an adolescent child who is defined between 14 to 18 under the law. You cannot employ them. You can employ them in non-hazardous, which they have listed. It's already there in the act. You can employ them with a strict kind of following the rules. It cannot be more than 6 hours. For every 3 hours there should be a rest. There should be kind of a mild work, and all facilities should be there. There should be at least 1 full day leave in every week, and you cannot employ them by 7 p.m. to morning 6 a.m. during nights. So all these procedures, I think educating our own neighbors on this issue, because I tell you honestly, there are many number of legislations, but people are not even aware of it. People are not even aware that there is a legislation on right to education. People are not aware that there is a legislation which prohibits child labor up to 14. So therefore, I think what we can do as a group, particularly all of you are from a very, such a wonderful group. I am so happy so that we can educate people, educate them about the legislations. I think awareness itself is one of the biggest tool to avoid, kind of any violations. I think we can do that. We can do that. Let us have a small committees in our own vicinity, in our own mohalla or a ward, wherever we are. So link up with the local bodies, whether it is a corporation or a, kind of a panchayat, work with them, identify children, put them back to the school, give them some additional support to learn, give them in case if they need some kind of primers, notebooks, whatever and all. I think that is a great help that we can keep moving.
Thank you, Dr. Niranjan. Could I have an alternate view from Dr. Mary? She's raised her hand.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Niranjan. It very good points about what we can do, what way forward. I think sir have already mentioned, and then which one of the slide that I have prepared, something related to prevention. And I could foresee a lot of activities that as Women Commission team can be doing a lot at different levels. So one is that capacity building of the volunteers of different churches, and then creating awareness of at different levels about the rights, as Dr. Niranjan mentioned. We can have clubs. We can have child labor prevention club at different churches, and then for these members or volunteers who can be part of that, who will be spreading or sensitizing the public in terms of the rights, in terms of the laws, in terms of what are the do's and don'ts and how to identify. I think it's rightly mentioned from Dr. Niranjan that having a small group, and then to be doing that, I think we can make a lot of difference within at our level. And one of the suggestions which I mentioned this morning, that having since we have a group, a team of expert from different perspective, and this child labor, this kind of issue, it's something where at different levels which need to be dealt with, and then from different perspectives. Example, experts from the field of education like Dr. Niranjan, the field from social work, and the field from psychiatry. Then we have volunteers we can have volunteers from other legal perspective. Then we also have youths, and children also can be part of the team. We can have different clubs. I think we can contribute a lot towards the society. And maybe I can read out some of those points also, which at what level, what are the other activities that we can do at our level, at prevention level. That first thing which was already mentioned, that awareness and sensitization of concerned officials about their duties and the procedures to be used in order to take proactive actions in the identification and elimination of child labor. That is one point that as a team we can do that. We can sensitize the appropriate stakeholders in doing that at a faster rate or a faster way of getting the work done. And then the other one is public awareness to raise about the problems associated to child labor and the solution within our level. And then dissemination of information on the various current schemes. There are various schemes which Dr. Niranjan have projected on the screen. And all those schemes actually something which help directly and indirectly to help the child and then the adolescents to prevent from such from such kind of crime, being trafficked by different, whether at home, within the family or outside the family. So I think those kind of things that need to be given such awareness. Then cover and yeah, there are schemes also to how to eradicate poverty. There are schemes for income generation, skill development program for probably for the family members. So these programs must be probably cover the families of these children who are migrating. Some of the children also who migrate from one place to another place, and they are also vulnerable to child labor. So sending children to, one of the things that we can do actively, we can contribute, sending children, especially school teachers, and then at our churches, we can, we can be very active in terms of sending, children to school, okay, and then to avail their rights, and then actively discouraging people from employing children in their homes, businesses, factories, and other places. Then the last one is something related to form a child labor prevention club, that is one of the prevention strategy according to the presentation today. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Mary and Dr. Niranjan. Apologies, my laptop started hanging and I'm a little disappointed because I wanted to show you a policy brief that I was part of, and with many other civil society organizations across this country, which we prepared as recommendations to the central government and the state government to address the issues of children who are suffering due to the pandemic. And there are recommendations there. And but one point I'd just like to highlight, on the cover page itself, it's a quote by Frank Snowden. I don't remember the exact details, but it's the quote is like this: epidemics are not one-off incidents. Every society creates the vulnerabilities that sets the space for these epidemics to happen. So having gone through this pandemic, we are still struggling, and many of us are doing well, but there are many who are not. And so I plan to have a little poll and to ask, but maybe we can just open it out. Is there any suggestions in addition to the wonderful ones that have already been shared? I'm so happy, Niranjan, that you're offering your mentorship and your guidance, and Dr. Mary, with all your wonderful ideas, that there are now concrete opportunities for the Women's Commission in the Archdiocese of Bangalore to bring together not just women, but children, families, and even those who are on the margins themselves. In every parish, there are families who are from the low and the middle class who are struggling. How do we become more sensitive? So let us open it out. Are there any suggestions that are there from our audience? And is anything concrete that we could conclude on? Or maybe even a date, or that perhaps everyone would like to come together again to continue this conversation so that it goes forward. So can we open it out? I know it's almost 5 minutes to 7. Any questions or any suggestions from our audience?
Arlene, I think we should take this a little further with the Women's Commission and drop some kind of concrete program on how to handle this. Not just like, one webinar and we're done with. No. We need to do something concrete.
Absolutely, Lorraine, totally with you. So that's something concrete. So I think our hearts have been stirred. There is a lot of positive energy. Many of us have already done a lot to help, but the urge to do more is still there. So is there any other suggestions?
We have a question. We have a question from Reba Satish, a question or a query. Reba.
Hi, good evening, everybody. This is not a question, this is a suggestion. There were a lot of valuable insights that were shared today. And I was wondering how we could use this opportunity to pass this information, because we all know that there are laws, but how many of us know what the details are? Arlene's first poll was very insightful, right? So why don't we use the WhatsApp University and have a small WhatsApp message that gives us a broad perspective of the problem, what we can do as conscious citizens, and what are the action points that we can take away from this workshop so that we can circulate it among people we know. We forward so many things, right? But very simple things, 2 or 3 things that we can do and how we can help people in need. If we could pass it around, I think that's one small thing that we can do to at least evangelize the cause and to help others who might want to contribute.
I think Dr.
Wonderful.
Amelia has given a very concrete suggestion. Go to the government schools, go to the orphanages. We have St. Mary's Orphanage and so many other places, Alphonsus School, I'm talking about in our area. Each person can locate something in their own parishes. Go to the schools, he says, and find out how many children haven't come back and see how many you can get back into the school system.
Absolutely, Lorraine. I'd like to suggest that we start with our Christian schools first. I think they have set a wonderful precedent even before the Right to Education Act. Many of our Christian schools had an option for the poor, and we're meeting poor students to pay their teachers. So maybe to map our Christian schools and start there. Which of the children who have dropped out? Why have they dropped out? Can we form little committees to visit these homes, or through the Vincent de Paul, through other groups to try and support these families? So a wonderful suggestion there.
Particularly look for, the children who are coming from economically weaker section, which is a section under the Right to Education Act. And I tell you honestly, because of this pandemic, not only in government and government aided schools, even in private schools, many children have already, left and they're already away from the school. Even if you are able to bring them 10%, 20% back, I think that is one of the best thing that what we can do for their for these children, for their life,
Not WhatsApp.
Somebody is speaking. Can we?
No, I'll handle that. I think we have Mary raising her hand.
Yes, I think in continuation with the suggestion to go and visit different schools, and then since these are the under 18, again there is a ethical that need to be followed, what we call assent form, and then so I think we should form a committee where all of those should be in place, where there should not be any complications because of our interest of helping others, helping children. So we should not end up in having any kind of issue related from others. So I think maybe we should have ethical committee also in terms of following the protocols, that consent form, assent form of all the parents and institutions. So all those things, if we can have a formal committee to be doing all these things also before we approach them. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's with all your experience in research and working directly with our social work students, Dr. Mary, I think you have a number of us here who are willing to go back to the field and support each other, but do it in a professional way, in a child-sensitive way, in an ethical way, and with the experience of Dr. Niranjan and you as well. I would like to just add one more suggestion, and that it did come up in all our 3 inputs. Charity begins at home. Is there something that we can do with perhaps the women? Most of us have women helpers in our own home to find out, are your children, how are they doing? Just have a conversation, have a cup of tea with them that you make and share with them, not they. You're so used to getting the tea from them. Literally, take a cup of tea and offer it to them. And are they still in school? Is this something that they need? Maybe they need a mobile phone. Maybe they need money for data. They need, something for just to boost their confidence and their faith in the education system. Because I can tell you, many children have become so bored and so disinterested in education because of this online education. They're losing interest. What is it that we can do to inspire them, motivate them? Come on, if you do, I'm not asking if you're first class. I'm asking you to do your best and to stay on in school. And maybe here is a little treat for you to motivate you. If you do, do your 10th standard, I'm going to buy you your first cycle, something like that. So can we begin at home? Charity begins at home. So I'm going to hand back to Reena and Lorraine for our concluding words. And thank you so much for this opportunity for being part of this conversation.
Just one thing, Dr. Aradhya, we will, if we are forming this committee, as Mary has suggested, with the Women's Commission, can we draw on your expertise sometime?
Sure, I love to work with, anything that we could do for, creating a enabling environment for children. Please count me as a, kind of a co-traveler. I am always with you. And also the biggest challenge, the moment we say that we are, regulating 14 to 18, there are chances that children are cutting down their education just for 8th standard, though they are willing to, continue at least for 10th standard. Some, we're just pushing them. So that's the reason the campaign against child labor always argue at least up to 18, it should be prohibited, but because of various reasons, we are not able to do that. So whatever, those kind of support system, kind of having conversations with our own people who are working with us in the families and helping their children's education at least 10th standard. I think children reach 10th standard, I think they can manage on their own. I think I have seen many cases which I am supporting for last 2-3 decades, and now they are, in such a wonderful position. I think that our life is really worthful living. I think we can, even if we do 1 or 2 such things, I think that's a great support. That's a great support. I am always with you.
Thank you so much.
Count me.
Mary, we have one more person now.
Same here. I'm always there because I loved contributing to the church and then especially to children and adolescents, because they are the nation builders. So I really, I would love to continue working for this cause.
Thank you. Reena?
We hand over to Reba for the vote of thanks. Any last questions from anyone in the audience here before we end? A few seconds.
Just one thing I just wanted to say, those from the Women's Commission who are already on this group, if you all would like to form a group, please get in touch with Mary or Arlene or Reena or myself to form a committee or a group to work on this further. Thanks.
Mary, thank you for your feedback. Not Mary, Priyadarshan, who's one of our participants. Would you want to unmute and say a few words?
Priya.
Yes, I think Priya, you have no choice. Priya has now been appointed as the Secretary of the Women's Commission as on today. So Priya,
oh, that's
your first words. Yes.
Yeah, very good evening to all of you.
Priya, we can't see you.
Yeah, I'm traveling, so I think I'll be off video, but you can hear me, I hope.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I've been listening to this session. In fact, on 8th of September, when we celebrated the Girl Child Day, this is exactly what we were looking for. Some continuity in terms of a project that we can undertake. And I think that's the answer to our prayers. Right here, we have Arlene, we have Mary, and now Dr. Niranjan, who's with us. So let's discuss this in our Women's Commission meeting, and let's form a committee and a team and work towards this. And I'm really so excited about this. There's so much that we can do. And we have more than 4 million people in our own Christian community in the Archdiocese of Bangalore. So we can do a lot. Yeah, let's take it forward. And thank you, Lorraine, for setting this up.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Thanks, Priya, for mentioning that. It made a difference rather than stating it in the chat. Yes. So yeah, I think with this we can conclude. Over to Reba.
Hello, everybody. I've been given the pleasurable task of proposing a vote of thanks on behalf of the Ascension Women's Cell to our speakers, Dr. Mary, Assistant Professor of Social Labor, Christ University, who gave us a very lucid understanding of the problem of child labor in India, and Dr. Niranjan Aradhya, who is a development educationalist and who gave us a big picture perspective of child labor. And between them, we heard about the laws and the provisions in our constitution to address child labor and the role of the civil society and what we can do as conscious citizens. A big thank you to Lorraine, who got in touch with Arlene and made this session a reality, and for putting together the action points, and our passionate moderator, Arlene, who really set the stage for the program today, and the Ascension Women's Cell for organizing this session. I also extend a very big thank you, a heartfelt one, to all of you who took time out of a lovely weekend to understand more about this issue. I invite everybody here to do your little bit to help an issue like this get the attention it needs and carry out the action points shared by our eminent speakers and our panelists today. Thank you.
Thank you, Reba. Over to you, Lorraine. Any last comments, and then we end.
No, Reena, I think we've got quite a lot of people who are very interested in this. Now we need to take this forward. Arlene, with the Women's Commission, Mary, we've got everyone on board. So great.
Sure. So, so with this, we wrap the session. Unless anyone wants to say a few words before we leave.
Anyone wants to share their experiences, if they've had any with child?
If you've had any that you've come across and how you've handled it, if anyone would like to share, that's a great thing, Lorraine.
I'll share one experience that I had. And that's what I wanted to just clarify with Dr. Niranjan also. When they say, you know, dial 1098, it's not that easy. We've had experiences with our neighbors who had little kids as home help, and it was very difficult to try and get them, you know, back into the system, because I don't know what they did. They were collected by the CWC in a van, and within, I think, about 15 days, they were back again. So, Dr. Niranjan, if you can just throw some light on how they managed to get them back.
I think, you know, probably, yes, that is an important question. You know, unless we follow a kind of a systematic procedure, there is always possibility that they will come back. So that therefore, so the reason is as why, you know, like
we were blatantly told, oh, nothing, we just paid and came back. That was really shocking.
Is it really shocking for us? Because, you know, the CWC is a kind of a committee which is supposed to, you know, see the best interests of the child, not really the people who have employed, you know, kind of children. So therefore, I think probably whenever we take, see, of course, the good way to begin is to create awareness. After creating awareness, if still they persist, you know, doing this kind of violations, I think we have to take that to the logical end. We have to take that to the logical end. We have to ask, you know, the Child Welfare Committee, what is that they have done, whether we can take the order, whatever order passed by the Child Welfare Committee, and if necessary, we can appeal. We can appeal to the higher authorities. They can't do like that because they are... Sorry.
Yeah. I think as somebody who actually works inside the government-run home for girls in Bangalore, and I don't know whether we have actually a CWC member on this call as well. This is a question I sort of flagged right in the beginning. When a family is starving and there's domestic violence, and you know, do we keep a child locked in an institution? Yeah. Institution under the JJ Act, or do we support a child? So I agree there may be some violations and some, you know, the lack of follow-up. So these are my concluding notes, in fact, what I wanted to share, that once you report a case and the child goes through the system and gets into a childcare institution, and because the Supreme Court has actually encouraged the CWCs and JJBs to send children out of CCI, because we don't want children suffering within these institutions which are locked up. And there have been situations like this. But that's not the excuse. What is best interest of a child really mean? Shouldn't the child be sent back home to live in a family-like situation, but with sponsorship, with follow-up? So I have been part of I also work at Enfold Proactive Health Trust, where we have been following up some of these girls. Not, you know, once in a month, how are you doing? Is there a crisis that is, so just parceling them off, you know, making a phone call, parceling them off, is only the first step to really address the, Niranjan, your last point of your slide, addressing the root causes.
Yes.
Why did that
Certainly.
child go into work in the first place? See, we should not be judging the women or the families who are, the children are being compelled, as you said, Niranjan, they're being pushed out of school. They are being pushed out of homes onto the streets to work to fill their stomachs. This is the reality, and I can vouch for it. I know
Yeah.
it. And I just want to say that this is a dilemma. You have a constitution, one of the best in the world. You have a child and adolescent prohibition regulation act. But what does all these laws mean in the midst of a pandemic? And that is the question that we have to answer, because the government itself is finding it so difficult to be able to prevent people from cascading further and further into poverty.
Absolutely.
Companies have shut down, offices have shut down, many of us and our family members have lost jobs. How do we expect the poor to survive? They have to work even below the age of 14 in order to fill their stomachs. And if they don't, they're getting into crime. So this is not a simple question. And I would not like to brush off any CWC member as a whole, because I know what a difficult job it is. The money for sponsorship, the funds for sponsorship that the state is duty bound to give and to provide. I know a case of a girl, and it's actually one of the girls that I mentioned at the beginning, that I approached for CWC for a sponsorship, and it still hasn't come. So the state itself, the government, is itself in a very difficult situation and not being able to fulfill its own duties under the Constitution. So the CWC being part of the juvenile justice system, and each one of us, what is the triangulation? What is the role of the state, the Child Welfare Committee, us as citizens, and these families, and the parents of those children? It's not a simple answer. So I can go on talking about it, but I just want to flag that it's not a black and white answer. And we need to follow these children who've been come back. Lorraine, if you said these kids have come back, it's a great opportunity because you know about it. So maybe we can support that family to try and understand this family needs sponsorship to be able to stay in school. Yeah, and civil society sponsorship can complement the state. Yeah.
Okay.
I was mentioning. Yes, Mary, go ahead. Can
I add, there's something which is about the government in line with the questions what we discuss about. Actually, if we come across such kind of family who doesn't have any means to help their child or adolescents for their education, there are in government in Karnataka, there are facilities available from the government, state government. There are government school, residential school. So these kind of school, what are called Murarji Desai, Kituru Rani Chennamma. So these kind of schools where what they call residential schools, where such kind of family who comes from that background, so where they cannot afford to to feed their children even their food. So then for the for the welfare of the child or adolescents, to be avail that services, to be to go to school, and then at the same time for their safety and security, so then that kind of school also can be availed. And in Karnataka there are 30 districts, and in 30 districts there are only 3 districts available such kind of schools. So maybe when we have such kind of system committee within our level, at our level, we can identify and then facilitate such services of such kind of family whose children who needed such kind of support from the government level. Yeah.
I just like to, sorry, button again. How many of these hostels are really functioning during the pandemic? If you look at our Christian-run institutions, childcare institutions, many of our Christian organizations run homes for children. How many of them have been open during the pandemic? I know how much I struggled to find a space for a child-friendly space for a child to live in, because the family situation is just crumbling. So these are all very complex questions. So, okay, so on that food for thought, should we conclude?
Yes.
Thank you everyone for joining in.
Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
evening.
Thank you.